going on. So I imagine some of that is dissipated. They've kind of figured a little bit out. But tell me a little bit about those struggles.
Yes, we people understand that better and better. Well, it looks a little bit, if you go to the website, it looks like a search box. So even though there's not a search but an equal at the end, people are a little bit confused by that. But we've learned to put more examples out there, and people actually just are smarter and they figured it out. And they investigate, and there's so many things that you cannot find in a search engine. A simple example that I like to give is that if you search for how many calories in 3 carrots, it turns out that there's a web page with that answer, so you get the answer. But if you ask how many calories in 4 carrots or in 217 carrots, there's no web page that has that answer, but Wolfram Alpha will calculate it for you. And so that's just a strong distinction. Another example that I like to give is the International Space Station, where if you ask about the International Space Station, we'll get the data from NASA from 15 minutes ago, the orbital data. We'll calculate using that orbital data where the space station is exactly. We'll show it on the map, and we'll show some orbits about the space station. And then from your IP address, we're going to get where are you on the planet, could you possibly see it? If you can see it, we'll draw star charts and show you where the space station is, and if it's not visible, which is most of the time for most people, then we'll tell you at what time and what day the space station will start to show up on the horizon and start its course around the sky. So it's a calculation. It's not something that you can find in a website, and that's what we do. Is for everything all the results we give is we answer your questions by calculating them.
Yeah, and you're working off of I would imagine mostly data sets and data streams as opposed to the typical search engine approach, which is web crawling and looking for contextual and semantic data.
Exactly. We do not do any web crawling whatsoever. We just have data sets that we acquire and feeds where we get the weather data, for example, where we get tremendous amount of information that way, of financial data, and then we just calculate on it to give the answers.
Right. So one of the things that I've been noticing, and I guess maybe before we get into that discussion, because I want to talk a little bit about automated journalism, and you had a pretty interesting anecdote along those lines. But I wanted to, before we do that, big data has been discovered as a theme or an idea or a marketing buzzword, maybe, depending on which company you're talking about, by the enterprise. Joe Tucci was at the EMC mega launch a few months ago, was on camera with us explaining the concepts of big data, like we didn't know. No, but he's got a handle on it. EMC's got a handle on it. Other enterprise players have got a handle on it. You guys have been living in this world where you're surrounded by mountains of data and are the instruments of making sense of that. And most of the enterprise is just now getting to the point where these tools exist, tools like Wolfram Alpha or Hadoop or things that can make sense of mountains of data, and they're applying that to their own mountains as opposed to, the Google search crawl or everything that Yahoo had in their index they need to make sense of. So this is definitely not what you guys set out with in mind. I'm sure you weren't talking about the enterprise. You're talking about scientific advancement of knowledge whenever you first announced your product. What opportunities and applications are you seeing for business and for enterprise with Wolfram Alpha's solutions?
Well, so Wolfram Alpha Solutions is trying to mix, the data that we have and intelligence and knowledge we have about the data sets that we're giving to the public, but sometimes some companies, they have extra, of course, information that's personal to them, or it could be financial data, which is not necessarily
medical data,
pharmaceutical. And so what we want to do is to mix that in with the other data, because in the end, if you start to interrogate, so first of all, we provide a solution to interrogate that data using a natural language. So we put linguistics on what they have, and rather than usually companies spend millions on trying to access the data that they have, we can provide a cheaper alternative to manipulate and access that data, but also mix it with the other knowledge, because what you don't want to do is to, and that's what people unfortunately have been doing so far, is that they have information about their data, but it's not compatible with mixing it and calculating it with the rest of the world. So if you want, for example, to know how many doctors you want to use in a hospital this weekend in a city, well, it turns out that it's not just the data that you have or just statistical data, but you might need to mix it with weather information, or you might need to mix it with events like South by Southwest that are occurring somewhere, and all of a sudden there's 25,000 people who show up in the city. That will have an impact on the requirements. And so that's what I think is really interesting, is to say we don't want to separate knowledge into different categories, which is a little bit what big data has been doing so far. We want to provide a solution where people can mix and calculate and compute the solutions, taking everything together.
Right, right, and actually at Strata, that was something that I noticed. There was a lot of mixing and matching of that. There was a lot of data modeling groups that were there, a lot of data visualization groups. So
business intelligence I think is growing quite a bit, and it's becoming more and more standard. So there's just in different components of it, there are solutions now that are competing to show you your data, so that you don't have to build the graphs yourself.
Well, I think with your vision, with Wolfram's vision of big data and data computation, I think that there is hope, because that was one of the themes that I saw emerge out of Strata, is that there's a strong mix of practitioners as well as the data scientists. I mean, the job board that they had up there, all looking for Hadoop people and data scientists, and there was a commingling of trains of thoughts there as well. So I mean, they were not seeing each other's approaches as incompatible. So, but one of the other topics I want to talk about, and this is the theme I saw emerge out of South by Southwest, is a lot of work in curation and aggregation as it comes to activity streams. What's interesting to me, as someone who's followed journalism very closely, just as a student of journalism, that the curation programs that are being used to make sense of Facebook streams and Twitter streams look an awful lot like newspapers and magazines to me. And they're obviously, social networks are the dominant way people want to consume. So what is clear to me is that computers and algorithms are going to have some sort of editorial role in the newsroom moving forward. I mean, that's obvious. It may not be today, but what's being debuted today and yesterday and tomorrow at South by and other places is, computer editors. And you were talking about the role, you and I were talking about the role of Wolfram Alpha in journalism. So I was wondering if you could just kind of, first of all, talk about how you apply it personally, just as a consumer of news, and how you might see it applied in the future as the computer's role as an editor may increase.
Yeah, well, so I think that the same way that the computers have, calculators and in fact Mathematica, and on which Wolfram Alpha is created. We've learned to trust them more than human beings. So if you need to do some math, you'll use actually the computer to tell you if the math is